Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. To nobody's surprise, Lane Kiffin, this Ole Miss program, cooking early in the transfer portal, landing another commitment from former Arkansas tight end Luke Hasz. The Ole Miss fans who've been rocking with the fellas the last couple of days, they know that I've been banging the table for Luke Hasz. And Dill, where I want to start here is I think you can look at the production and just totally miss the point with Luke Hasz. You go back to his freshman year, I've said this before, he was well on his way to being a true freshman All-American in 2023, goes down with an injury. And then in 2024 just wasn't utilized the right way in this Arkansas offense. I mean, Taylor Green was only throwing it to Andrew Armstrong. And look, Andrew Armstrong, very good wide receiver. I don't blame you for throwing the football that many times to him, but you kind of just let this dynamic tight end weapon just kind of stay on the shelf. And I look at it and say, look, Caden Prescorn was a damn solid tight end for Ole Miss, but I don't think he was a difference maker. I think Luke Hasz can be that difference maker. It's hard to find tight ends that can inline block their tail off, but also be difference makers as pass catchers. And then it's hard to find tight ends who are really difference makers as pass catchers, but also are serviceable blocking on the perimeter. Luke Hasz is that guy. He's a do-it-all tight end that I think can be a difference maker in the passing attack. A much-needed get for Ole Miss. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, as always, to the Ole Miss fans, it's been a blast talking this program in the offseason. A lot of y'all been rocking with the boys going back 12 months ago. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'll give you the T-box here. You might be as big of a Luke Hasz fan as I am. Sell the people on the fit with this Ole Miss team.
Obviously the big thing is trying to replace Caden Prescorn, and you just look at Luke Hasz, it feels like he's a better fit in this Ole Miss offense. I think he's a little bit more versatile in terms of where you can line him up, because for not being the biggest tight end in the world, you said it, a very willing, very capable blocker, can block on the perimeter as well. But I think the fact that he has more of the route tree available to him as a pass catcher, and whether he's doing it in line, whether he's out on the boundary, I think you can do more with him than you probably could with Caden Prescorn. And I think he's got a little bit more savvy as a route runner in terms of creating space and understanding where he is on the field than probably Daquan Wright. So I think that combination of those two will fit a little better than probably Caden Prescorn.
Yeah, this commitment allows you to keep Daquan Wright in that I love Daquan Wright, but you're right. He's not as much for true tight end as Luke Hasz. So, like, you bring in Luke and say, all right, we're going to have him be that traditional tight end that does everything. And again, I think he's just an upgrade for, like you said, replacement of Caden Prescorn. I just think it's a flat out upgrade in terms of what I think Luke Hasz can do in this Ole Miss offense. And then you allow yourself to continue to be creative with a guy like Daquan Wright, who I love. Like, it's hard to find 245-pound bodies that run 11-second 100 meters. That's what Daquan Wright brings. So now you got two difference makers at that tight end position. You know Lane Kiffin is going to get creative in terms of how they use them. One of the things I love is, Dill, when he gets targets, he hasn't dropped the football in his career at Arkansas. And then an 85% completion percentage when targeted. Like, when you decide to throw the football to Luke Hasz, you kind of know he's going to come down with it. He's a reliable pass catcher, a quarterback best friend, which is kind of what you want in a tight end. Luke Hasz gives you that. Dill, let's talk about another Arkansas cat that's finding his way to Oxford, Jaylon Braxton. This one happened, I believe, late last night, maybe early this morning. I think we're both big fans of Jaylon Braxton as well. I'll give you the T-box here with Jaylon Braxton.
I mean, you just go back to the freshman year. Obviously, the sophomore years didn't work out, lack of health, just some issues with that Arkansas team in general probably. But he was so good as a true freshman and just a purely good corner. And again, that's just like hard to find. I think there are a fair amount of corners in this class, but I don't know that there are that many of his caliber, if you will. Because if you turn that freshman tape back on and project a little bit of development, I mean, this is a really, really good boundary corner.
So how about this? I was saying, kind of reminds me of the addition that was Trey Amos last year, where it's like you've seen a little bit. The sample size is small, but the sample size is damn good. And you give this an opportunity to have a little bit more playing time in 2025, could be a very good cornerback. That's kind of how I see it with Jaylon Braxton.
And I also, frankly, I like the remaining eligibility. You probably will have him for 2 more years. And that is one thing I look at with Ole Miss's secondary, that if I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'd probably like to see change a little bit, is it does feel like I mean, you're going year to year with very different
Agreed.
secondaries year after year. So it is probably something you'd like to see them get a little bit younger, have some guys who you have more of a smoother transition, if you will, through that secondary room. Because it does feel like kind of, I don't want to say unsustainable because the college football is different now. You can get talent into the door more quickly, but I would like the idea of seeing guys play for a couple of years in the back end,
Yeah.
especially for this Ole Miss team, and be able to have some more continuity than probably what you've seen for the
Yeah,
past
well,
few
like Lane
years.
Kiffin catches a lot of flack from nerds like you, although you've switched your tone a little bit of you can't sustain this in the transfer portal. Well, it's like they yes, they get some one and done guys, but they also get like Jackson Dart was the starting quarterback for Ole Miss for 3 years. Trey Harris was your wide receiver one for 2 years. Like they do use the transfer portal not just for one and done guys. They'll go out and add a guy like Jaylon Braxton and Luke Hasz, quite frankly, although Luke Hasz might be one. I think he might just have a really good year in 20, which you're rooting for. If you're an Ole Miss fan, hey, if Luke Hasz
Oh,
comes
you
in
want it from
2025,
Braxton too.
yeah, and it is a dog, and goes to the NFL, like good. That's probably means we're going to the college football playoffs. But they do recruit some guys that have years of eligibility. It's not necessarily the same as high school recruiting, but it's kind of close. You can get guys that have 3-4 years of eligibility remaining. Jaylon Braxton's that guy. Dill, we saw this news pop up late Friday night. So there's a couple teams that I immediately thought of. I thought of first Georgia. Ole Miss was in the top 5 of teams I thought of for Justice Haynes. Dill, one of the bigger letdowns for me from this Ole Miss team was the lack of ability to run the football. Now, I don't think the offensive line was quite good enough moving bodies off the line of scrimmage. They didn't utilize the running back room right, in my opinion. Like they had some really good running backs that weren't running the football. They had a bunch of running backs that could do different things, but they didn't have one running back that was that guy, that Quinshon Judkins type of guy.
They didn't
You
have
see,
that great ball carrier. That's kind of what I'd say.
yes,
Because as much as I'm a Ulysses Bentley fan, like he's not a tote the rock 20, 30 times
yeah,
game in between the tackles
and
and kind of wear you out. Like Justice Haynes can be that guy.
and Henry Parrish wasn't either. You know what I mean? So it's like the they didn't have that running back that was like, yeah, that's the clear running back one. So they're trying to like scramble and try to ride the hot hand. It just the running back position didn't work. I think a lot of Ole Miss fans agree with that. How do you solve that problem, Dill? Let's just go get a guy like Justice Haynes. Say, hey, we got a running back one. If he stays healthy, he's a 20 plus carry game guy for the whole season. Criminally, in my opinion, underutilized at Alabama. Now, that's not a shot at a guy like Jay Miller, but Justice Haynes was way too good for the limited opportunities that he got. Was a stud coming out of high school, has looked good when he's carried the football his first 2 years. Go get a guy like Justice Haynes. That would solve a lot of running back problems. And they're going for a lot of guys, right? Ahmad Hardy from Louisiana Monroe, who was amazing as a true freshman. Wayshawn Parker at Washington State. They're going for that true running back one. If you want a true running back one, I don't know if it gets much better than Justice Haynes and Dill. How about just the number one player in the transfer portal, Eric Singleton? Like it sounds like they're in a very good spot for Eric Singleton Jr., who again I think fits this Lane Kiffin offense really well because he does two things at a high level. One, he can work vertically down the field, which is obviously very important. It's a very important aspect of the Ole Miss offense. We saw how many deep shots they won with Trey Harris, but then he gives you that hey, just get him the football in space and go let him cook after the catch.
Well, in
Talk
that
about
ability, like you saw how Georgia Tech was able to be creative with their offense
yeah,
because their wide receivers were all so good at handling the ball. They could all run it. They could all run clean
yeah.
routes. A couple of them, like Eric Singleton, were able to probably be more advanced in terms of how you could work with them down the field. But that type of guy, I think, can be really dangerous with Lane Kiffin. Almost like how I think we hoped Juice Wells could be. It didn't
Yes,
seem to
agreed.
work
Such
out
a
exactly
disappointment.
with Juice Wells, but a guy who,
Yeah.
again, I think you can do a lot of different things with. Maybe even more so than like Trey Harris, who
Yeah.
obviously knew what he was. But a guy like Eric Singleton, the way they were able to use Watkins at times over the past couple of years, like that type of guy has been really dangerous for this Ole Miss team. I think Singleton can very much be that.
And then they're going to get a visit from Dane Key, who might be my personal favorite wide receiver. This is your Trey Harris replacement. A bigger body that works vertically down the field, exceptional in the contested catch category. Ole Miss is running it back, though. They're just gonna go reload. They lose a lot of good football players, but they also know they have some guys they like on this roster, and we're just gonna go do the exact same thing we did in the portal last year and run this thing back. And I talked about this yesterday, but I want to say it again. Ole Miss's approach to the transfer portal, I think I like a lot. Like they know they're going to be aggressive, so they get kids on campus early. A lot of these kids who are transferring, they don't want to go through the recruiting process again. You know, when you're talking about high school kids, maybe you want to play the long game, get them in for the last visit. A lot of these guys want to wrap it up and enroll in January. And so they're Ole Miss plays it right. Let's just go get after these kids and get them committed early. That's what Lane Kiffin's doing. Another massive get in Luke Hasz, Jaylon Braxton, another big time player. And then it sounds like we ain't going to be done talking about Ole Miss over the next
And
couple
one
of
thing I
weeks.
think is big is I think they have the defensive line more buttoned up than probably they've had in the past couple of years in terms of young guys coming up through the pipeline, especially if Walter Nolan stays. I mean, that would be
Ooh,
a
you think he
huge, huge
stays?
thing for this Ole Miss team. But I even look at you got guys like Cam Franklin, the way they've recruited that position
Yeah.
behind a little bit better. And even a guy like Xavier Harris, like I don't think people get how good he was for that team. Eccles, like they do have some more young talent working their way through this pipeline that I'd like to think, because I look at certain positions, wide receiver, very full, cornerback, very full, defensive line. I don't have a ton of defensive linemen in the portal. And I do think you're starting to see Ole Miss, I like to think, be able to bring along their young guys to be more productive, because that is a really hard spot to fill through the portal.
Yeah. Recruiting the line of scrimmage at the high school ranks is important because that's those two positions that are hard to address in the portal. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.